All right. So welcome everyone to The Art of Drag, a conversation between the author Jake Hall and the executive director of blackpink, Dominique Morgan. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder with my partner Donnie Jokum of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. We are, we like to say, a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. We're better known as a queer bookstore inside the LGBT Community Center in Manhattan, in the US of A. Jake is joining us from Sheffield in the UK, and Dominique is joining us from Omaha, Nebraska. So we're all over the place. Thanks for joining us tonight. I wanted to say that you can purchase The Art of Drag on our online store, and I'm going to share a screen and show you what that cute little thing looks like. I know what I'm doing. I'm totally proficient with technology. Okay, so yeah, if you go to bgsqd.com/store, I put it in the chat function, you'll see our online store, and our featured products for tonight is The Art of Drag. So please support us by buying books from us. That really helps us to keep going. And thank you to everyone who donated for this event. That also helps us to keep going. We really appreciate it. So we're an all volunteer bookstore run by myself, my partner, and several volunteers who help us out. And we've been in the LGBT Community Center in Manhattan since 2014. And we happily reopened after a too long hiatus. We opened in July, and now we're back to pretty much regular hours, Wednesday through Sunday, 1 to 7. We are doing some in-person events, but a lot of them are still virtual, given the state of our fragile world. So just keep an eye out for upcoming events. You can sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter on our website. So with that business out of the way, I'm going to introduce our two guests, and then they're going to get started in talking about this great book and about the politics of drag and how it relates to abolition, prison abolition, which is something close to our heart. So I'll introduce Jake first. He is a freelance, or they are a freelance writer who has written for Dazed Digital, ID, Vice, High Snobiety, is that how you pronounce that? I think so. Into Refinery 29 UK and British Vogue, among others. They have written on topics from sustainability in fashion and body shaming in queer communities to government crackdowns on queer people and intersex genital mutilation. Alongside this work, they are studying for a PhD, oh God bless you, at the University of Birmingham. Jake's research aims to illuminate the link between high fashion and queer theory, as well as arguing the potential of clothing to radically challenge and subvert the social constructs of gender, sexuality, and race. Dominique Morgan is an award-winning artist, activist, and TEDx speaker. As the executive director of blackpink, the largest prison abolitionist organization in the US, she works daily to dismantle the systems that perpetuate violence on LGBTQ, GNC people, and individuals living with HIV/AIDS. Partnering her lived experience of being impacted by mass incarceration, including 18 months in solitary confinement, with a decade of change-making artistry, advocacy, and background in public health, she continues to work in spaces of sex education, radical self-care, and transformative youth development with intentions of dismantling the prison industrial complex and its impact on our communities. Ms. Morgan is a 2020 10 Outstanding Young Americans Award recipient, NAACP Freedom Fighter Award recipient, and 2020 J.M. Kaplan Innovation Prize recipient. Her new album, Pisces in E-flat major, is available on all platforms, and her book, Sex Ed for System-Facing People, will be available January 2022. Find out more about Dominique at dominiquemorgan.com. So please give a warm and visible welcome to Dominique and Jake. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so I'm turning it over to you, Jake.
I mean, Dominique, I wanted to chat to you a little bit about obviously the pandemic. I mean, I know that you've been kind of like, Black and Pink has been running drag shows as kind of, you know, mutual aid events. And that's really kind of brought the politics of drag to the forefront. I wanted to just ask you a little bit about how it's been to kind of organize those events and why it felt so important specifically to bring drag into that space.
I think for me, it was the pandemic. So it's going to be a longer answer, but it really was a full circle type of thing.
Yeah.
I identify as a Black trans woman, born and raised in the Midwest. The Midwest is pretty white in the United States. Therefore, the queer spaces are pretty white. But I've been a musician for many years, and early on, as an R&B singer, when I would not be booked to be in kind of mainstream spaces, queer bars, gay bars would put me on shows. And it would usually be like drag shows, you know, like I would come out and sing live, or, you know, it would be, I would have friends who were title holders and they would ask me to come out. There was literally a time where that was the most consistent way that I performed. And then I reached a point, I ran Pride here, I created Youth Pride in Nebraska. And so had a surface respect of drag. And when I say surface, like loved the performances, but did not have a deep understanding of the history of drag and how it impacted our societies. And truthfully, it was coming into 2020. My medical and social transition happened in 2020. And I connected with this incredible Black woman named Jasmine Tasaki from Memphis, Tennessee. And Jasmine is now our director of advocacy at Black and Pink National. She is also an incredible drag performer. And her mother is Tandy Iman. So that historic, you know, Guinness World Record entrance of a drag performer with her coming through the ceiling as Wonder Woman, that is Jasmine's drag mother. And I just became very intrigued. First of all, the ADHD in me was like, we're mid-conversation, I'm like looking up things and I find this beautiful history about this Black trans woman that in some spaces people were kind of talking about her like she was a past thing, when I went to Instagram right in that moment and young people were using the hashtag and people were doing artist renderings. And I was in Memphis for Trans Day of Remembrance last November. And Jasmine and I were talking about it. That coincides with Tamisha Iman being on the last regular season of Drag Race. And I had never watched an episode of Drag Race before then. And I was like, okay, so I've, you know, Jasmine is my sister. Miss Tandy, like I kind of have been like clearly an icon. And I'm like, okay, like there's a lineage piece. There's something deeper here. And so I watched that whole season after Tamisha was off the show, but still watched it, kind of delving into it. And then I found myself going back and watching the old seasons of Drag Race. And then I started doing more research. And there was a moment, one of the first drag queens was a Black slave in the late 1700s. And it just hit me that as a queer Black person, as a Black trans woman, as much as, and there's this place amongst trans women where we don't want to be aligned with like drag queens, right? Like I'm not a drag queen, I'm a Black trans woman. Like many people try to put that together. And I get the strong desire to educate people about the difference. But what I found through like these relationships and kind of this learning was that, yes, it's a different form of an identity, but a drag persona, being a drag performer is not an identity, it's a job. It's an entertainer, right? So like as an abolitionist, we sit out here and we're like, you know, there are no blue lives because being a police officer is not your identity, it's not your life. It's the same thing. I can't be confused for a drag queen because being a drag queen is not a gender identity. It is a way for these incredible artists to display their art in a multitude of ways. And so there was just this immersion for me and realizing how much of Black history, Black social change in queer spaces had been led by drag performers. And last year working, my friend Ian Fields, who is the ED of Okra Project, and other folks, watching these incredible drag performances in the middle of the street last year in the pandemic to raise money to keep people going. I'm like, yo, this is something that's really powerful that I need to tap into more. And it's a part of my lineage. I've never been a drag performer, but I see the ripples of the work of what Black performers have done and how it's positioned me to live a fuller Black life because of what they do, right? So that was like the aha for me to like really dig into it and find the respect. In regards to like engagement, it was finding like-minded people, because I do still believe that those who are part of a culture should leave the work within that culture. So as someone who doesn't do drag performance, it was about finding drag performers that really understood what we cared about and who were open, again, with using their skills, their talent, their incredible brilliance to either bring further attention to what we were doing at BNP or raise funds. And one of our biggest events, shout out to Charisma Valentine from Lincoln, Nebraska, is a white trans woman. And Charisma and I have known each other for nearly 10 years. And we laugh about how we both like did not identify as trans, and being back in the drag dressing rooms back when they would just put up a curtain and we're all back there changing. And now to have these conversations, we raised like $2,000 of these young drag performers coming out, putting their heart on the line, because performing, no matter what your medium is, you're putting yourself on the line. Yeah, and I feel like we as a society don't respect and affirm how that truth is still true for folks who are doing drag, right? Yeah. And these queer folks did this, and I think that's powerful. The truth of we can be our own liberators isn't just about, like, that's not going to just be contained to protests or phone zaps. Our own liberators are the folks who can go in and be like, baby, we're gonna put a drag show together because this girl has to pay her rent, or this girl wants to get her breast surgery, or these people need to eat. Or in our sense, Black and Pink is building a youth campus that's gonna serve the whole country, and we wanna be a part of making it happen. So that is a very long answer, but it was the reason I was excited to do this today is that it was a journey for me to really have a true respect for drag performance and be really true in my heart about the position of drag art in pushing us forward as a community. It's not an and also, it's not just something that you do on a Sunday night. Yeah. These folks 24/7 are thinking about how to use their superpower to make our communities better all over the world.
True. And it ties into so much as well, like the delegitimization of drag that you were talking about. Like, I feel like drag isn't really taken seriously as an art form. And kind of even when it came to Drag Race, it became so commercialized so quickly that then people kind of saw it in this kind of mainstream sphere, and it became kind of depoliticized quite quickly. So it's really interesting that your kind of entry point was that very political history. Like, drag queens have been leading these revolutions, but they just haven't been talked about.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's this space of, like, even in abolitionist spaces, right? Last year, you saw them talking about abolition on the front of Time magazine and all these other places. And there was this fear about movement work becoming too mainstream or commodified. I also see the benefit of things becoming mainstream. And although, like, listen, at this point, I follow all the hashtags for Drag Race. And if y'all go to my social media right now, that redemption thing is my thing. Like, literally, I've done multiple photo shoots in the last couple of months where I've redone outfits that I did last year, and that's the hashtag. I just did a magazine cover. So the power in it. But I remember sitting to talk to my nephews about my transition. These 3 young Black boys, teenagers, right? And not having to go as deep as I thought I had to, because they had seen Gigi Good on Drag Race. Their mom watched Drag Race and like, oh, like Gigi. And in that moment, I was just like, I think that's awesome. I think it's awesome that these 3 young Black boys who are rough and tumble in a whole bunch of different ways just had ancillary information because they're walking past TV when their mom was watching it, and it becomes normalized. So for every for every downside to a mainstreamness of something, there is the beauty of people who would have never gotten to touch it, getting to see it and having that aha. And I think with Drag Race, it is an opportunity. And also additionally, you're seeing these folks from Drag Race do really dope things with their platforms.
Yeah, hugely. It's like a real emphasis on that as well. I mean, even working with like the challenges, there are so many kind of opportunities to have that political platform to talk about these issues. Like it really is now embedded into the format of the show, which is something that like even I like encounter doing the promo for the book. Obviously, you meet a lot of people that come to drag through Drag Race, and they all have that same kind of reverence for it, and it's really amazing to see. Like it really has brought conversations that I don't think would have been happening on this level outside of the queer community now. They've just opened them up and like have like even my granddad asking me about like, you know, trans politics. And it's because they watch Drag Race and they love Drag Race, and that's amazing.
And I think you're also seeing, because drag from people's perspective is very white,
Yeah,
you're seeing these Black drag queens, these drag queens of color have a dope platform. And then you're seeing white queer folks talk about things they wouldn't have talked about before, like Simone in the Black Lives Matter dress. Like, I want that blown up and put in my loft, but I remember like it was just a beautiful moment. But you're seeing them bring something to what people, you know, I'm coming to get entertainment, but they're also bringing this additional perspective and these other topics. And so like, you know, heteronormative spaces, of course, are hearing new things, but I also get excited about the ways that drag performance, let's take it out of Drag Race, drag performance period, gets to challenge like this idea of white queer culture and really hold them accountable to the representation, the power of Black and brown folks in not only the art, but our issues that are affecting us. Yeah, y'all are here on a Sunday and y'all want to have drag brunch, but baby, they're killing Black trans girls in the streets. So like, what we gonna do about that? And I think that's dope as well.
And because also, I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier, like the history of drag and just queer history in general is so whitewashed. Like to the point that we get a Stonewall film with like a cis white guy throwing the first brick, and it's like,
baby, listen, I never watched it, but I was on Twitter and like somebody like posted a clip, and who sat in a room and watched that and said, you know what, this is it. We really did something, girl.
It's kind of like, that's the thing of it, it's like even these stories, because the story you were talking about earlier of like the first registered drag queen being essentially a Black former slave, those kind of things get buried so deep, it takes like centuries of excavation to bring them back up, and therefore communities that kind of pave the way don't get the credit. And that's why we're seeing so much, like there were so many revisionist drag histories that trace it back to like Shakespeare, and it's like, no. Like, that was part of the reason with the book as well, of it's like, drag has always been a kind of art form that's made up of multiple layers, and it has multiple elements. And it's like people kind of looked back to Shakespeare to make this kind of like aha moment of like, well, drag was started by white men. And it's like there were women in Kabuki that were doing it 2 centuries before. People kind of use this very white drag history to make a political point and to maintain that exclusion of people of color, of trans people, and it is bullshit.
Well, I think the tactic is that you're the first one or it never happened before. Exactly. So you make the person who's doing it feel insecure. And there's the person's name was William Dorsey Swan, and they were born in 1858. And they were in Wikipedia, they're labeled as the first drag queen.
And they were out of slavery. That's the thing of it. It's like so much of our history lives in court documents, in prison records. Like you have to really dig through and know what language to look for to bring it up.
That's a word, Jake. I call you Jake because it says Jake. That's a word, because even right now, if you are looking for the best data on queer and trans populations, you have to pull PREA data. Yeah. Which means they have had to be in a jail, a prison, or a detention center, and they would have either had to self-express as queer or trans, or they would have had to experience physical or sexual harm. for that data to be pulled, and that data is still ran by the Bureau of Prisons. So looking back then and still now, we're not on the census. If you're looking for trans and gender nonconforming folks, we would have to enter into incarceration for there to be a way for us to be counted. That blessed me right there. Like, I know that to be true, but the way you said that just got me together.
I mean, it does make kind of just gathering data so much harder, because I feel like people don't trust oral histories. Like, people don't want to just kind of like look at these amazing queer traditions and Black traditions, and to look at these kind of genuine oral histories that can tell you incredible things about communities. They don't want to believe it unless you have hard data to kind of back it up. And then you have to go into this whole thing of being like, well, that data doesn't exist because our records have been burned to the ground, you know, like it just doesn't exist.
And that's what I love about things like Drag Race, or even just looking at social media in general.
Yeah.
When it comes to the queer experience, I was at an event, and it was like a kind of like they were talking about like Black history, but a young person was talking about how, like, for young Black and queer folks, Black and brown queer folks, Instagram, all these platforms are their own archival of what they do. And so yeah, we tell kids, you know, don't put that on social media because it'll never go away. But also, that's something great that people will know who existed. You know, we're living amongst a generation where no one can erase the fact of what BLM has done. When you look at what they did with the Black Panther movement and how they did their best to erase that, you can't erase the work that's been done. You can't erase the things that have happened with orgs like Critical Resistance and Black and Pink and places like the Transgender District and things of that nature. You can't erase it because now it has a digital mark. And so I think now more than ever, when you look at the work of drag performers, even in the pandemic, those girls were in the living room twirling, honey.
Yes.
Oh my God. Full backdrops.
The commitment. That's
outfit
the thing,
changes,
like,
girl.
And like reveals and all of this on like a ridiculously tight budget for maybe the chance of like a $20 Venmo. Like, there was no guarantee at that point of any kind of financial kind of, you know, remuneration for that, but people still did it because of love and passion to keep that community spirit alive. I don't want to diminish the real struggles of the pandemic financially, but I mean, also that community spirit has had to kind of migrate online to keep people sane.
Well, and I think, you know, when I look at the work of Black and Pink in the pandemic, we did, we're nearing $100,000 of redistribution of funds for COVID response. And we removed many of the usual barriers you would have to access, you know, a pay stub or something like that. Because when you look at drag performers, most of them are not going to be hired somewhere and have a pay stub.
Yeah.
How are they going to prove their need or prove their income? And so also, I think it was just important in the pandemic to recognize that this was their passion, but also many of the support services we create in our society through the nonprofit industrial complex. As someone who runs a nonprofit, positions folks like drag performers, sex workers, people who are not going to be able to give you an itemized statement of their income to be that much more impacted by things like COVID, because COVID was just the, you know, I call it the top level of a pandemic sandwich. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was just something that came along that if you were already going through it, it shifted it more. I did a piece with the ACLU here in the US that went kind of viral about Ellen DeGeneres talking about being in captivity in her mansion. And I'm like, when the white girls feel oppressed, how you think the Black girls doing? Yeah. Right? When the white girls feel oppressed, what are the Black girls doing?
Mate, and the activism in this whole thing has been like the ultimate shit show. It's just, you see these things and you're like, did nobody have a PR to like advise on this? Like, really?
Because the girls are just going to Instagram on their own. Because and for me, it was a yes and of this isn't me saying what you're feeling isn't real. This is me saying, because you're going to your first outlet to express your fears and concern. This is me saying, if you, mama, in a $10 million house in the hills with your girlfriend, with your wife and your dogs and all your things, if you were stressed, imagine what Miss Mama's out here who is barely having enough money to keep her studio is going through. And I'm sad that the pandemic of COVID in our world did not activate us to lean into empathy and solidarity more, because it should have been a space where we recognize that it doesn't matter what Greg does, what I do, that if Greg doesn't take care of themselves and Greg and I just happen to walk past each other, we could impact each other's health, right? None of us lives a singular life. And that is something that I expected to see. I didn't expect to see it in mass because people are people, but yeah. I expected people to we have more responsibility for each other than we ever probably thought before.
Definitely. And it kind of is interesting to me how at the start of the pandemic, people were talking about this being like a real landmark moment. And one of the kind of main taglines was, things can't go back to normal. Like, this has to change everything forever. And then it's just bizarre how, like, as the months keep ticking on and things do keep shifting back to normal, it's like there seemed like so much kind of radical potential for like a real overhaul of like so many systems at the start of the pandemic. And that kind of seems to have faded a little bit from mainstream discourse. There feels like a lack of imagination at this point because people are just fatigued, and that energy they had is kind of gone.
Well, because no one wants to feel oppressed for longer than they have to.
Yeah.
And the people who are most consistently in power are white, cis, heterosexual people. And so the quickest way they could get from feeling impacted to not feeling impacted is what they wanted. But they aren't recognizing, and maybe some are recognizing, that them not feeling impacted is nowhere near addressing the journey of Black and brown queer folks. Like that's a real conversation, right? Of y'all are post-COVID, but mama, like it's many of folks who don't even know what post-COVID is because they're not post-white supremacy, they're not post-racism, they're not post-xenophobia, they're not post-HIV and AIDS. Like, we have communities who are not post things that have been around forever, and y'all are like, y'all are post-COVID? Girl, that's not it. And so I think that is amongst queer and trans folks. And when I say trans, I'm looking at like the expansiveness of what does it mean to not be identify as cisgender. We need each other. We need each other. Mm-hmm. My liberation, I could get ahead and I could feel as free as I want to, but what I believe and what I've lived and what I've experienced is that my freedom won't be as sweet if you're not free, Jake.
Exactly.
If Greg isn't feeling that, right? And that's what that's what I feel like when I think about how drag performers curate spaces. It's about curating very free spaces where everybody can feel a little bit more liberated. You always, you got the straight girl that's there for her wedding night, night for her wedding, and she got a little too free. But I think there's the importance to recognize that when more of us feel free than not, spaces are that much more powerful.
Definitely, and I've been in so many kind of like drag clubs and drag bars where people are maybe in drag for the first time, or I mean, especially when I wasn't like out as queer and definitely not out as non-binary, like those kind of spaces were real kind of hubs of expression for me because I was surrounded by people that would push me to do drag and push me to kind of like get on stage and push me to face my fucking fears and actually just do it. And that's something really incredible. Like that energy lives in those spaces and it's really, really vital.
Yeah. I also feel like in drag spaces, although you're welcome for who you are, you can't come half-stepping.
Yeah.
like, you know what I'm saying? Like, girl, come as you are, but also, girl, come with it. Like, I love that about drag. I love the creativity. I love one of my good friends, Eva Styles. She's a drag performer. She now lives in Chicago, but she's from Omaha. And I remember watching her. We have a bar here called The Max, and it's been around for maybe 30 years. It's like the largest bar in our city. And out of, I think now at this point, like 35 Miss Maxes, there's maybe been 5 Black Miss Maxes over those years. Yeah. And I'll never forget the night she won Miss Max and crying that she won.
Yeah.
and realizing the excellence of drag performance, and excellence looks different. Like there's a level of excellence to everything, right?
Yeah.
And you get to decide that, but you just have to hold yourself to, am I doing my best? And I think some of the times I love it the most is, I love a good pretty girl that's giving fish, you know what I'm saying, on stage, and, you know, is body for the gods. But I also love a girl that's just like, listen, I threw this together, but I'm about to perform down for you bitches, and y'all better glue your wigs down, right? I love, the thing I love about drag is that a girl would just like go all out. I'm like, girl, do you have props? Girl, you're climbing up the side of a wall? Ma'am, what? Like, yo, like it's been a really funny 24 months of me becoming like a drag stan in
But
deep
I love that keeps happening, because it's one of those things that I feel like people really, I mean, drag has been around for so long in various different guises, but like, it's amazing to kind of see it keep growing. And I know we talked earlier about Drag Race, and people kind of like to say that Drag Race isn't the be all and end all, which is obviously true. But like from that, there are new platforms like Dragula that are popping up, and you have like the Vixen of like Girl Magic, like you have like so many new collectives that are popping up, and that's all based on this one springboard. Like there's just more variety now. And it's like, sure, there's a debate to be had about who gets recognition for that. But also just the fact is there's just more drag than ever. And that's really exciting as a drag stan.
And it's dope. And even if you know, listen, I've started watching the other seasons in other countries. And I remember here in Nebraska, first time a cis woman ran for a drag pageant, and how the community gagged. And now there's a cis woman on the latest season of UK. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's awesome. I think Kylie is incredible, and seeing you know, a trans woman win this last season, and seeing Gottmik, it's just dope to see people of all identities see drag performance as a way for them to feel like they are showing up as their best self, and that's the way that they show their excellence. And recognizing that drag is inherently and can never be anything but queer, right? You know what I mean? Like these other identities, recognizing the ways that I show up as my best self, right? Is through this stage. Like this idea, well, trans women transition and become women and they're satisfied. No, Kylie's still a performer, right? She's still a drag performer that happens to be a trans woman. And those were moments that I thought some of the most important conversations was had, because it's like, oh, they do drag because they want to be a woman. First of all, some of them Drag Race boys out of makeup, yes, God, call me Aunt Dominique Morgan, you know, right? It was just as a person who is a sex educator, right? Also, I use drag oftentimes in my classrooms. Right? Because you have a lot of young people who think that drag performers, like that's a sexual orientation, that's a gender identity. It's a form of presentation. And then I get to talk to them about, well, what does it mean about presentation, and how presentation just kind of ebbs and flows. Like 20 minutes before I got on this call, I had a head wrap on and a house robe, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the hair came out, and so but I was Dominique both times. So I just think that what I love about your book, and what I love about the conversations that you are starting, and Greg, I'm going to be in New York in a couple of weeks for a GLSEN board meeting, so I will make sure to stop by. Is that we're talking more about it, and I think that is really awesome. And I just want people to recognize that when we say we, there's a lot of young people who are recognizing their greatness and how dope it is, and it's coming from. You can feel like you're really awesome on your own, but when you recognize that you come from a line of greatness, be it biological or be it based on the lineage of gender or performance, it's just something that just, I remember sitting there looking at Jasmine, this person that I think is the bee's knees. Like Jasmine Tasaki is not to be played with, baddest girl you ever want to meet. But I'm looking at her and I'm like, Tandy was your mother? Like you sat across from her and she told you how to put on foundation? Like the queen that like I think that's iconic as hell. And yeah, the conversations you're creating through this book I think you're gonna see how people are going, no, people got to think, as a creative, you think you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're leading with your heart. You're investing so much time. And sometimes you don't see how your power and your work can maybe manifest and bring people together. I think I foresee that there are people who are going to be able to have deeper, richer conversations about what not only drag as this performance piece. I think that's why people kind of throw away Drag Race as like this thing, because they don't recognize that whatever your gender identity is, as a queer community, drag is a part of a wind behind our backs that has made many of us live a freer, fuller, more present life, has made it safer for us to show up in certain spaces. And you created something that is giving people a space to kind of steep into that. So be very proud of yourself. I think it's an incredible book, and I think we're going to see some great conversations come from it.
I really appreciate that, because it was one of those things where you kind of look at how much drag history is gatekept, but that definitely has an impact, because there are people that use drag as self-expression, and then they kind of feel like they can't do that because they don't see themselves represented in drag history. Like, if they don't see an inclusive drag history, which talks about how drag is just a kind of excessive or like exaggerated manifestation of any gender performance, then they aren't going to feel like those tools are available to them. And it's like, it does kind of make people shrink into themselves because they think, oh, actually, this is not for me. And it's like, there are so many incredible performers from all, like, a vast array of backgrounds, identities, like there's a whole spectrum. And it kind of feels like there was no real inclusive history that was saying that actually that's always existed. It should continue to exist. Like, these things are really incredibly vital. And I did just think it kind of played a wider role in like how queer history is, like, people are kind of reluctant to take on queer history, which I understand, because you're looking back and you kind of like, you have to be careful, because sometimes there wasn't the language that we have now to identify how people would have identified themselves. But at the end of the day, it kind of felt like an important project to take on, because I mean, these histories do need to exist. And also, like, we've seen a lot of conversation around like the objective history, but there is no objective history. Like, histories have been written by conquerors, by colonizers. Like, histories always come from a point of view, and it's never a subjugated point of view, really. So it's like, to take a stand on this book and say that we are openly trans inclusive and that, these histories do exist, they just haven't been legitimized, was like a really key point of focus.
Well, I want to say, so I'm also someone, who's formerly incarcerated. I was nearly 10 years in prison. And you ain't seen a drag show till you seen a drag show inside of a prison, honey. You ain't seen a girl walk until you seen a girl tip through the prison yard, honey. With the extensions that they were able to get from this person that came in, with, they got a sewing kit and they were able to shift and make something out of a sheet. Like, drag and performance, period, is something that touches every place, right? Like music, like dance, like all of these things. And I say that all together because most people don't label them together. When I was in the deepest part of segregation, when I was living on death row, I still sang songs. I still wrote songs. When I felt like I had nothing left, I was still able to use my voice, right? When I've seen people, I've been in places where people are experiencing deep, impactful homelessness, and they will still dance. And maybe that's the way that they're trying to get some money to eat, but it's also a way that they express and liberate themselves out of what they're going through. And drag is that too. I don't know if y'all remember those videos that were going viral a couple of years ago. It was, I think they were Asian children, queer young folks who were putting on full drag shows, or like early TikTok, they were doing full Beyonce routines, honey, with bricks as heels. Like, the girls are gonna make it happen. And I think that is, like, it's funny in the moment, but it's a realization that this is a medium that, yes, can be the most beautiful, incredible dress that you'll wear on the finale of Drag Race that may cost you $100,000 or whatever. But also, sickening drag happens in places where the girls are wearing a dress from Fashion Nova that's $10, and they ain't even got hair on their head, and they are dancing and performing down. When I tell you I wept in New Orleans in June. Shout out to Mariah Moore. She is the executive director of an organization called House of Tulip in New Orleans. And they did an anniversary event. And there's this incredible R&B singer named Kelly Price. And Kelly did a concert, but that night, they did a drag show where Kelly was there and all the girls performed Kelly's songs.
Oh my God.
And I watched this Grammy-winning singer cry watching these drag performers perform for her. And then there was young queer child, they performed, and I say child because I'm auntie is almost 40. They were of age, but when I say child, it's, what it's given. But they performed this gospel song and we were laid out. One of my best friends, Andrew, and I you want to talk about that snot, the ugly Oprah cry, weeping from this performance, baby. Do you hear me? The whole room. And then Kelly Price gets up and they turn on the mic and she does a full gospel praise break after this performance because of how this child sent her through it. It's just, I say all that to say, don't underestimate the joy that these performances can bring. It's competition for some people. You have your faves, whether it's local or whatever, because people talk about the Drag Race girls on social media. If you've seen a local competition, the girls are cutthroat as well, honey.
It's twice as much because they have to be.
Exactly.
It's you have to create things from nothing. And when you have no resources, it pushes you further. And I hate this idea because obviously in an ideal world, we would just fight for a society that doesn't have those barriers in place. But you do ultimately have these amazingly creative and emotional, heartfelt performances that come from people that have really nothing. And they're twice as powerful because of that. And they resonate.
Super hungry. But you just see that it's not, I just don't want people to think it's all competition, all about it's the joy.
Yeah.
I had never, estrogen has made me a slightly more emotional, but I'm a Pisces. So we love a good cry anyway, baby. But I had just never been so deeply moved. And it was an aha. So again, when y'all reached out about this, I was this is an important conversation to talk about dismantling, because people talk about abolition in the prison sense. I'm an abolitionist because I want to dismantle any system that seeks to prevent people from having access to whatever they think is going to position them to be their best selves. And I need people to be clear about my personal definition, because people are always it's inside of you. Yeah, something can be very much so inside of you, but you know what you need to completely manifest that, right? And oftentimes people assume you want to manifest it for others. I tell folks, I love if a man gives me a compliment, but I really look good first for myself, and two, so women can say that can get a little bit of this vibe, because a compliment from a woman hits different, better than a man any day in this current life. But there are things that I seek out that brings out all the stuff I'm feeling about myself on the inside, right? And depending on my access and privilege, I may not be able to have access to it. So I feel like many people get stuck around abolition when the talk is solely around prisons, because people can't fathom a world where arresting people, incarcerating people isn't the way that we maintain a safe society. Yeah. I want people to recognize that we're talking about anything that feels like a barrier to you feeling like, you know what, this is going to make me feel like my best self. And honey, that can be a size of clothing. That could be a food allergy, whatever it is, that moment when you really need something that's going to position you to feel like your best self, and you have to go through 5 steps to get it, that little twinge of feeling like you're being oppressed, I want you to not feel that, because I want people who are feeling 20 times that to not feel what they're feeling. And that's a great way that I try to bring people into abolitionist conversations, because, okay, maybe we don't start at prisons. That's too much for you to be like, I can imagine a world without prisons. Can you imagine a world where you walk into the store, and if you are plus size, you don't have to put your hand under the pile of clothes and lift it up to see if they have your size? Yeah. That you know they're gonna have your size? Let's start there. And then we can take a journey through these other levels.
Well, that's the thing. I think like a lot of people come to abolitionism from this kind of like very entry level kind of point where they just see it as being too radical and don't engage with it. I think when people talk about abolition, there's an assumption that they mean you have to dismantle these structures and then put nothing there in place. And it's like, no, abolition is about like endless potential. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just about saying this is bad, get rid of it, see what happens, just leave it at that. Like, nobody's advocating for that. It's one of those things that like, abolition is the kind of like the starting point towards imagining new futures that don't have those systems in place. And when people talk about like, I mean, we saw a lot of conversation last year gaining traction around like defunding the police. And there seemed to be real interest in kind of imagining these viable alternatives. And people were looking to Angela Davis and they weren't seeing her as like, I saw so many people that were engaging with these theories for the first time that hadn't realized that once you get past that entry point of here's what we're asking for and here's why we're asking for it, people were setting up these really complex roadmaps for like what could come next, and they were all infinitely better than what we have now.
Well, and we're talking about removing a world where we lean on systems and creating a world where we lean on people. The people come up with the ingenuity. The people come up with the answers and the solutions and the powerful moments, right? So we're not going to lose the brilliance. We're not going to lose the answers. We're just going to center those people in it, and we're going to be the hope is to create answers and solutions and be incredibly change-making, centered in people, centered in the needs of people. And I think that we are a microwave society. We want it quick and fast, hot and ready.
Yeah.
Right. We also, from a sexual health perspective, I had an aha where it was like, I think another reason the society is able to really keep us in this stronghold with prisons and jails is because we all love a toxic relationship.
Yeah. We
love, especially as a Pisces, I used to be in love, baby, with somebody's potential versus what they did every time. And so we can live in a world where they know that these prisons and jails don't do what we think they're going to do, but we hold on to hope. And we are afraid of we know what this beast is and how terrible it is, but we know what it is. We're afraid of trying to replace it. We're afraid of that not working. And we have not been trained that you can knock yourself down and get back up and it can still turn out okay, right?
Well, this is where I kind of want to like reiterate the compliments that you gave earlier, because you were so wonderful and so complimentary. But like in turn, this is where your work and like organizations like Black and Pink give me hope, because like before pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic, whenever that is, you will always send to mutual aid. And it's that whole thing of it's like you really spotlight just how much communities can have transformative potential. And you've done all of this, like you've raised all this money, you've put on these incredible, events and brought communities together that have had endless obstacles stacked in their way. And that truly shows like the power, the resilience, and just the strength of community. So I don't understand why there's such a failure to imagine that could be the way forward. Like mutual aid has been the ultimate message of the pandemic. It works.
Because mutual aid is based on us, and we are people who have been oftentimes harmed, and because we don't get spaces to heal, because most folks don't have access to great therapists, and whatever other module you want to use to address the valid harm you've experienced to try to figure out how you can, and healing, I think people say healing like it's a finish line. Healing is lifelong stuff. And so I'm more focused on how am I working to be able to be more amongst community than feeling like the best way for me to stay safe is not to be around community. That we have to do that, because what happens is we create mutual aid spaces and people either don't engage or something goes wrong and people are like, well, we'll never do that again. Well, no, don't give up on it. You've spent 200 years giving prisons and jails a chance, and we get one chance for mutual aid. That's how y'all feel? No, no, ma'am, not on my watch. It's okay. Well, then what happened with that? Why did it not feel good? What can we change to make it feel better for you? How can we shift it? Well, we can do this, we can't do that. Like really having negotiation. And I know without comprehensive sex education, healthy relationships, communication, we will not have an abolitionist society, because those are the skills that helps us lean on each other, even when we have difficult times, even when we're going through a pandemic, because baby, I didn't have Amazon Prime shipping, but I had community during the pandemic. Amen. Right? Like I can't get any furniture ordered, but I had my friends and I have my community. And so I want us to focus on how we can pull each other in more in whatever way feels safe for you, more than we're pushing each other away. And that means that and that I hope offers space to know we're not going to be perfect. And things aren't going to be easy, but even in the midst of difficult times, the goal is to lean in. I would rather lean into you all, even if we were in the most difficult situation, than lean into a system that not only most likely has harmed me, but I can look at the long list of people it's harmed and impacted in deep ways. And so we need to have more conversations like that amongst our people.
Well, also, I mean, more conversations about what you were talking about in terms of like the definition of healing, because I feel like the ultimate lie about the prison system is that rehabilitation is the goal. Like rehabilitation is not the goal. Like we know this, like it's just not. There is an entire workforce that wouldn't exist without prisons. Like these aren't new conversations, these aren't new ideas. But it's like if you do take a more holistic approach to healing, which actually looks at the fact that people are fallible, that people make mistakes, and that community relationships are complicated, then you do kind of lay the foundations for a healthier way forward. Because then when you start to really question what that looks like, healing doesn't come without difficult conversations. It doesn't come without opposition. And it's like we're talking this mutual aid networks, like of course there are going to be issues within them because we're still building blueprints for a new society, essentially. So of course there's going to be difficulty.
Well, and it's human. That's the dope part.
Yeah.
Like we're inherent, we gonna mess up. But it means that you want to surround yourself with humans that have the potential to help mess up, but also are very open to learning from that mess up and wanting to be better every day. I tell folks, when I tell you I was the hottest of hot mess at 20 years old, baby, when young people are like, oh my God, auntie, I want to be, all the kids call me auntie. Auntie, I'm like, when I tell you I was a hot buttery mess out here, child, and I had queer elders that tried to tell me what's right, and I just had to learn my lessons. What's important is that we stick around even when people make those choices and we're still in it with them, right? And that's what abolition gave to me. Listening to Miriam Kaba, to share it, like being in those spaces, it helped me recognize, it allowed me to do away with this idea that I was ever a bad person. It allowed me to recognize that I just had growing and evolving to do, and to be consistently intentional at evolving. If I look at something within myself and I'm not pleased with it, to work on evolving it and have people around me that I am being transparent with about, hey y'all, this is something I really want to work on. Kind of check in with me, hold me accountable, because we can think in our heads and we see ourselves. I remember the day I realized I had breasts. Like I had been on estrogen for like a year, and my friend inboxed me, was like, girl, you on this live, you might want to put a bra on, girl. And I share that because when we're in our own bodies, we always don't see physical changes, emotional changes, right? Shifts. And so that's why community is important. Community gets to see your glow up.
Yeah.
And we love when people get to see our wins, but also community gets to tell you, listen, the way that you said you're showing up, you're not showing up like that. How are we going to get us back to that, right? And so like community is powerful and essential to an abolitionist world. We at Black and Pink know that community happens, whether it's behind a prison fence, whether it's in the community, whether it's in the gay bar, whether it's at a drag show, community happens, whether it's on Facebook or whatever, community happens, right? And we have seen it over and over again that when we invest in healthy communities, and healthy is not 100%. As a sex educator, like people think healthy is like, we're 100. No, even the girls who get on Instagram all day giving you meal plans, I see them in McDonald's at night when I'm in Atlanta working for a couple of weeks. Them girls ain't 100%, but they're healthy, right? Healthy is not about 100%. So healthy communities, which means that we have our things, but we are the best versions of ourselves now. And we continue to work towards that. And I think, again, when you look at drag performers, when you look at these spaces where people are telling stories, people are representing experiences that people have not seen before, watching Two-Spirit folks perform in drag is something that if you have not seen that, it's something incredibly beautiful to see the experience of Indigenous people displayed on drag stages. That's something that is actually it's a blessing to see, right? And you see that ripple. You go into a Black church and you see mime performance, baby, that's drag. Yeah. They do a drag to Yolanda Adams in the Black church. You know, what am I like? It's a way of expression, and we don't have a healthy society without free expression. We don't have a healthy society that doesn't center people, and we don't have a healthy society that isn't focused on really being excited about who we are today, and being hopeful with who we can be tomorrow.
And also, like, we're talking about community, like those familial structures in drag is so important as well. I mean, I loved when you were talking earlier about those kind of like interactions that you'd have with queer elders. And I think it's really important to hold on to the fact that we don't have a lot of queer elders because of the AIDS crisis and how it was managed. Like, these intergenerational conversations are really, really important. And we see that so often in drag with like these tips being passed on and drag mothers and drag houses. Like, so just as it's kind of central to abolition, like this idea of community, it's also central to drag. Like, it all ties in.
Everybody, fathers are so important. And I lost both of my parents before I turned 21. But what I've realized, what I know is mothers are so powerful in the experience of our like communities, not just one-on-ones. We need mothers in our communities. Yeah, and the beauty about drag, about folks in the drag community, about queer, about trans folks and GNC folks, we usually sit in that mother role in some way, shape, or form. And it brings a level of nurturing that we just, as people who most likely have not had a lot of access to nurturing in our life, it's something we really need. And it's something that makes our communities better. And I also want to say that we also lost a lot of our queer elders to incarceration, right? Of these folks who went in, they were dead named. They did not have access to changing their names. Were not able to maintain medical treatment, all these other things. There's so many folks died of HIV and AIDS in incarceration. And even now today, that's happening, that we just need to do a better job of leaning into each other and knowing each other and knowing that we existed, right? There's something powerful about somebody being able to mention your name when you're not there and also mention your name after you're gone. Because from now on, if somebody be like, you know Jake, I'm like, you talking about Jake? Yeah, I know Jake, child, right? Because then we have connections, and then no one can say we weren't here, or no one can try to change the narrative of what we accomplished when I've been in New York so many times. I've never been to y'all bookstore. That's a problem to me. My good friend Arya Saeed, one of the co-founders of the Trans District, her entire team will be in New York through Friday. When I get off of this, I'm gonna text Arya, because they went and saw the bust of Marsha P. Johnson. They went to the park. We need to be in these spaces, because whether we like it or not, once we hit about 35, 40, we're the queer elders, and we got to tell our babies about it. and so we can be sad about what we've lost, but we can also celebrate what we have. And right now, today, at 7:01 p.m. Central Standard Time, we're all here. And that's something that we need to take more time to celebrate the presence of who we are. Not just resilience, because I feel like resilience, you celebrating my resilience is you're glad I'm still alive because something tried to kill me and I kind of made it past it. That ain't enough for me. Just celebrate that we are here, and that because we are here, that means that we get to keep trying to be better. And that's what really excites me every day, in my work and in my life.
Well, also just in the amount of times that you said that people call you auntie, like, just that makes me so happy that you have that relationship. And like, these people are quite clearly gaining so much from you. And that's why it's really important to me to like.
I'm gaining from them.
Yeah.
I think I gain more than them, because as queer folks, they will try to make it seem like we live a singular lifestyle, or, we either have to be married or we have to have biological children and all that. I watch what I say on Facebook, because my nieces and nephews biologically or not are watching, right?
Okay.
When I'm out amongst the world, it makes me know that, yes, I have community accountability, but I also realize every day these young people are expecting me to show up as my best self because they love me enough to respect me and share that with me. And my way of loving and respecting them is to never be a fool in front of them and never position them to not learn from me, my bad choices, but also learn from good choice. Like that, Jake, that's the power of community, is that of course, I hope I impart something on them. But in my 39-year-old body with no biological children, I still am like, I made a Facebook post the other day. I need y'all to give me all these calendar invites for graduation. I started my Christmas list because they give me a larger purpose to show up outside of work, outside of some of the things that can feel wonderful, but also daunting. And you want to auntie's children now too. So when you in the US, you got to come on through and I'll make you a meal and we're going to get into it, because that the beautiful community connections build inherent accountability. And when we are accountable to each other out of love and respect, we build healthier communities overall.
I also hear the borders are going to open in November, so I might have to take you up on the offer.
And for my 40th birthday in March, I'm releasing my album called Sex Education, and we're doing a party in the transgender district. But one of the things is I've never been outside of the country. And so we've been talking about, tipping through. So I might be coming to you, honey, and give me a brief little tour and we can tip through and see what it gives.
Yes.
Sweet. I would love to have you both at the Bureau someday. And cook for you, because I love to cook.
I can do it. As long as
What's that?
If there's food on there.
Excellent. Someday I hope to get out of this 250 square foot apartment so I can have more people over for dinner.
Yeah.
But seriously, this has been such a great discussion. It's been so lovely to listen to both of you talk, and you're speaking to me so powerfully. I mean, that's why we founded the bookstore, was to have community, to bring people together. And yes, we're online right now, and that's great. And that's a great way to connect, but nothing beats being in person. And I like to make that happen as much as possible. So we're going to keep doing both. I mean, we don't have to choose.
Accessibility matters. I've been telling people before I was, working at Black and Pink, when I was in undergrad, I couldn't attend all the things. I didn't have funds to be flying all over the place 10 years ago. And there is beauty in folks being able to tap in to these sort of spaces, no matter where they are. I was just in Nashville. You think of these kids who are in smaller towns, in spaces where they feel like they're the only one, being able to show up in spaces like this and order books from the store and being able to read these things, it makes them feel connected. So I'm really glad that you all, that we still made this happen. Jacob, I invite you, hopefully if you're up to it, to write something for the Black and Pink newsletter. Goes inside to our 20,000 members. Greg, I'm gonna have comms reach out to you. We're always looking for places where our members can order books, and that place will send those things into the prisons in an appropriate way so they can receive it. A lot of the mail order book services have been automated, and so they don't put the right stickers and things. And so many of our people want books and things, and their families will order them, but most places won't ship to prison. So I really want comms to reach out to see if we can a great partnership and maybe, get something in the letter, because there's 20,000 people inside who need to hear these things and know that great work is happening, and know where they come from also.
Honestly, whatever. That sounds amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to. I would love to make that happen. All right, my dears. So good to meet you and talk with you. And I look forward to someday meeting you in person. Keep doing what you're doing.
All right, talk soon.
You're beautiful.
Love you. Y'all are so fabulous. Talk soon. Bye.
Good night.